Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Melissa Ngan, who serves as President and CEO of American Composers Orchestra, ACO. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
So it's so great to be able to talk with you. You not only have your experience in leadership at ACO, but you've been at Fifth House Ensemble and a host of other roles, and you teach entrepreneurship and have had entrepreneurial, obviously, experience in a host of ways, not the least of which Fifth House. And so there's a host of things that I want to be able to talk about. However, there may be some people in our audience who aren't familiar with American Composers Orchestra, and especially a very, very unique orchestra in the country. So could you kind of just share and give an overview of the work of ACO?
Yeah, absolutely. So ACO really exists to reshape the American orchestral experience through its repertoire. And what I love about the organization is that for many years, it has been a discovery space for the next generation of emerging composers. And, ACO is known as an orchestra that celebrates the American composer. It's actually the only and the leading symphonic orchestra that really considers that to be its primary purpose. But one of the things that I found to be a little bit underneath the surface is that we have the work we do with the orchestra in New York, which is phenomenal and we're really excited about. And we also have work that we're doing in partnership with orchestras nationwide. And that to me is a space to really grow. We have a program called Earshot that we partner with orchestras across the country to do readings. And it originated with this idea that orchestras have these unused services. And so why not use that space to read the work of emerging composers? But what's really exciting about that work is that it's a space to discover composers from diverse backgrounds, from diverse musical styles, and also to create calls for scores that are really deeply integrated with the artistic and community priorities of any given organization. So we're really building a repertoire through all of that I'm very excited about, and also creating a space where people who are in a position to program for orchestras across the country can come to be able to find more people that they would like to know.
Awesome. So one of the key things that I just heard from that, and thinking about a lot of people watch the show who might either be, in leadership roles or working in administration, was that collaboration is really key to what you described. And that a lot of times, our organizations, we can find ourselves either very siloed and then also sometimes either resistant or hesitant to kind of partner with others or kind of let what we're doing go out into the world. As you think about kind of that collaboration that you have to be doing to take that core work of yours, but really bring it nationally with all of these other orchestras, could you just share anything about how you view collaboration?
I mean, if you read the first line of my bio, it's all about creative acts and collaborative practices. And there's a reason for that. I'm a chamber musician at heart. It's where I spent the first 16 years of my career. And to me, a lot of people think that they're collaborating when really what they're doing is sort of cooperating or, trying to find ways to get people to sort of just compromise. And for me, collaboration is about the invitation, first of all, the heart with which you come into that and really seek to find a space that's not just, here's what I've pre-planned and the cake that I've made for you to enjoy. It's like, nope, I've got a few ingredients here and I'm really curious where we should go with this. So let's create an open space to do that together. So to me, collaboration is really about creating an authentic space for people to know one another and to imagine something together that could never have happened without that conversation taking place.
Oh my God, I love that. It's so much of what you just shared. And obviously the tie-in to just viewing it artistically as a chamber musician. But then also just that ultimately in a great collaboration, it is more than what either partner ever could have created or would have created on their own, because it's not just bringing that fully baked cake. I absolutely love that. And that kind of brings me back to kind of, being a chamber musician and entrepreneur, and having founded, the Fifth House Ensemble. Is there, a lot of times when we have career trajectories, those who are, performers, they like want to stay performers, or those who are an entrepreneur want to be like, okay, I can never leave my organization that I founded. And then those that are administrators often may not dabble in that. You kind of have this whole arc that you're touching on all of these pieces. And it's just wondering if you could share kind of about your decision-making process, right? Especially one to leave, what I can only imagine was your life's passion, this organization that you founded and invested so much in. How do you make those decisions about what you choose to do in each of these stages?
Yeah, thank you. That's a beautiful question. And what I can say is I'm an endlessly curious person and I am pathologically obsessed with growth. So one of the things that I really wanted to do with Fifth House was to create a space where we could really imagine the ways that musicians could be helpful out there in the world beyond just performance and education. So how do we create partnerships and collaborations and make chamber music with people who don't necessarily identify yet as musicians and artists? And you're exactly right. Performing was a huge part of that for me. And in a way, the decision and the timing got made by the idea that I was starting to be pulled in a lot of different directions. As leading the organization, as a consultant to major arts organizations, as an educator, and as a performer. So there's sort of a capacity issue there. But I also am a person who's very strongly motivated by what kind of impact the work and energy that I'm putting into something will have. And in an odd way, that's not ever really about me. Perhaps I'm the worst entrepreneur on earth because I don't think about my own career trajectory as a primary objective. What I'm thinking about is what I'm actually putting out there in the world. And I saw with ACO, first of all, it's like my first job interview in 16 years. And I'll also say that it was an opportunity that came to me. I was nominated for it. And I think when it came across at the time it did, it was at a moment where I was thinking to myself, how can I actually be in a space where I can take some of the things that I have learned and experimented with and understand how it applies in different contexts. And I thought that at that juncture, that would be primarily through consulting. And I don't think that I would have made the leap into the orchestral field if it weren't for this moment, if we weren't going through the twin pandemics of COVID-19 and racial justice in this country. But I feel like this is a period of time where the field and all of us collectively as human beings are listening in new ways. And I felt like this was a moment where the work that I had done in the past might make a difference.
Wow. Well, there is absolutely no doubt you are making and have been making an extraordinary difference. And you kind of spoke about, of course, right, the twin pandemics going on. And so I especially thought it would be great to get your insights on racial equity, right, on diversity. And we have many acronyms, DE&I, however we want to put it. And especially, I'm curious your thoughts, both from the perspective as a chamber musician / entrepreneur, but also now at ACO, and thinking about this importance of DE&I as it relates to new work, as it relates to the art that we share with each other and with our audiences. Just wondering how you view it, and also administratively, how are you tackling it at ACO?
Yeah, it's a great question. It took me many years to really understand that the way I grew up has a lot to do with what motivates me professionally. I didn't think those things were related, but I'm a person who, look, I've never met another person who shares my exact cultural background. I'm Brazilian, Cambodian, Chinese, Vietnamese, all kinds of strange things, and makes for really good food, by the way. But what I can say about that is that I never really had a place where I belonged. I wasn't fully Asian. I wasn't fully Brazilian. I never really had that space with my family. I didn't speak the same language as either side of my family. So getting together at events. And I will also say they didn't speak the same language of love. So one of the things that I think is really interesting is that as a young person, one of the things I valued was bringing people together who are very, very different from one another. And what does that mean for our ability to create a successful interaction, to create more beautiful and meaningful work, to find a space for understanding? How did that actually enrich my life to have the different perspectives that were in my house and in my extended family? And so as I take that forward into my work, I find that I've honestly and with curiosity and joy sought out projects that were highly unexpected in terms of where people were coming from, whether it was their cultural background, their stylistic background, their professional experience. And I think as we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and also belonging, being able to create a space where people are actually able to show up as the whole human self that they are and be celebrated for the wealth of that experience and the cultures that they bear as they come into a space. To me, that's a primary thing. I don't underestimate the importance of looking at it from a numerical perspective and knowing that we're on a certain trajectory of saying, how many people of color we're bringing to our programs and, how many people we're hiring and all of this. I think that's a really excellent start. But I think one of the things we have to consider in that process is how are we showing up for people as human beings and creating a space where people feel that it's a two-way learning street that we're in together and that we're actually able to benefit from that wealth of experience that will transform our organizations and the purpose behind our work if we are listening in the right ways. So how I think about that as an administrator, I think the basic commitments that any organization has to make is to, first of all, doing the individual work to recognize why you're doing this work in the first place, that it's coming from an authentic place from within you as a human being, as a person, when you show up to that. So that's work that I'm doing internally within myself. It's also individual conversations with everybody on our team to see where they are in that trajectory, what's important to them, where do we need to find places of understanding, all of that. So it's a human individual experience before it's an orchestral, organizational, or collective experience, I think. And then we think about, on every level, how can our hiring, how can our programming, how can all of these practices that we have the ability to touch in our work, how can they become more inclusive? And how do we measure our results? What commitments can we make in advance to consider that? And then I also very constantly want to be thinking about and listening to the artists and the people that we're bringing into our space, and constantly and vulnerably asking, how can we make this better? Because I won't know the answer to that question in advance. And so we have to be open to learning as we go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And especially just the curiosity, right, that you first mentioned, and openness and interest in others, organizationally and individually, personally, I think is just such a powerful and clearly effective approach at leadership. So unfortunately, we're just about out of time, but I always just like to ask all my guests, during these times, because a lot of this work, while it has this extraordinary impact, some of it can be, pretty tough, and there can be some pretty tough days where it seems like we can't overcome these obstacles. What do you draw on for strength during those toughest times? Where do you find inspiration?
Honestly, the thing that saved my life during the pandemic was every day, Fifth House had a 10 a.m. deep listening session on our Facebook page. And it's still happening now. So if you want to hang out, please feel free. One of the things that I love about that practice, it's sort of at the intersection of creativity, improvisation, music making, mindfulness. And I thought at the beginning that we were making that for other people. It was a practice that we had used in many years in artistic work and also in social service and education work, and have 5 years of research around. But one of the things that I will say is that it ended up being for us and for everybody else who shared that space, just to spend a half hour connecting to the creativity that was within my own mind and spirit and soul, and also to really authentically make connections with other people through a creative act that I didn't know before that moment. That saved my existence at a time that was very isolating and could have otherwise been incredibly depressing. And so I'm just further reinforcing that idea that creative acts can transform the world. It certainly did for me.
Melissa Ngan, you truly are one of the great arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much. Grateful to be here.